Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another Wednesday evening with the Clear Mountain Monastery community. This is our monthly conversation. Ajahn Nisabho and I try to get together on one of these Wednesdays to talk about different topics. And Ajahn Nisabho, it's good to see you.
Namaste, Ajahn.
Usually we take a theme, perhaps some kind of paradox or something which is just mutually interesting for Ajahn Nisabho and hopefully interesting for other people. And this week's conversation is about finding faith in Nibbana, and want to suss out the meanings of those words, what they mean for each of us, and how we've kind of come to our, if we have faith in Nibbana, what does that mean? What's the journey? How has that progressed? And what does that look like in practice, and what does it feel like in practice, and what things have given rise to that faith or that confidence that Nibbana is something worth striving towards. So and as usual, we'll have our conversation for about 15 minutes, half an hour, and then open it up to questions. So people can start putting questions in the chat in YouTube at any point, and just opening it up. Ajahn Nisabho, it might seem like a bit of a leading question, but maybe could you, how would you describe your relationship to this concept of faith in Nibbana? Is that something you even think about? And how do you think about it? What is it? How does it manifest here?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, especially coming after the talk you gave on last Saturday on the Punya Kirya Vatu, or the 10 bases of merit as ritual. And, these two sides of things in terms of this very clear structure and, something by its nature woven into the conventional reality we live in of ritual versus, now this topic of Nibbana, which is that which we're, transcends that. And there's an interesting sutta, we've talked about it, I think, called the Aganya Sutta. For those of you who don't know, it's a somewhat baffling sutta on first glance in the Digha Nikaya, and it's the story of the creation of the world, basically, or the cosmos. And unsure, it's not sure how completely early it is as a text, but basically the narrative goes that there's these Abhasara Brahmas, which are the Brahma gods of the second level of jhana, basically the cosmological equivalent of the mind in second jhana. And they sort of look down at the earth and they touch this sort of moss growing on the ocean and begin to eat it, and it's delicious. And so they fall and become embodied and begin to have sexual relationships and fights, and here we are. So whether or not you take this one, obviously science says things happen differently in a certain way. But what I found so fascinating about that story is this deep-seated idea of what we've lost. Like, for me, faith in Nibbana, there's something in the human heart that knows what it's meant for. I mean, dukkha, suffering, stress, struggle, whatever you want to translate it as, often is associated with another word called dharata, which is like, how would you translate dharata, Ajahn? Disturbance?
What was the suggestion?
Dharata, Dharata. How would you translate that?
Or the state of holding? I'm actually not.
Yeah, something. Yeah, like disturbance or holding. I've heard this referenced in a few places as dharata, and even that word seems to imply that we know what it's like to not hold, and that is nibbana. And so for me, both that sutta and all these words about what dukkha is imply some deep-seated, almost primordial or perennial intuition of our true home. And I know that's what Longpo Cha referred to, Nibbana as. There's that talk called Our True Home. And I just think that's significant because I find when someone, in the suttas, there's all those moments when the Buddha teaches someone and people say it's as if wonderful, marvelous, it's as if what had been turned upside down has been turned upright, what had been covered has been uncovered, which all imply a sense of recognition rather than learning something new. And that's just my experience again and again, is like when people come in contact with the Dhamma and really get it, it's not that they're finding out something new, it's that something they've always known somehow is clicking into place, and they're finally able to articulate it and understand something about that direction. So all to say, like, that's all woven in here for me. And yet I can remember very distinctly the first moments that searching found a clear thing to crystallize around. And it was when I was 15 reading Siddhartha, and there was the image of the Buddha. And I just remember something in my heart just completely changed. And, it's a somewhat un-Buddhist book. Like, Siddhartha goes off and lives with a courtesan for 30 years and then ostensibly becomes enlightened in Hermann Hesse's estimation. But the image of the Buddha, just, there's a sense of golden light and like coming home, stepping into the stream you've been made for. So yeah, and I've just seen so many people have that experience of faith in Nibbana not being an abstract concept and not being something learned, but rather just finding suddenly a vision of something you've always sort of intuited somehow. And yeah, Ajahn, any thoughts on that? And then I can ask you for questions, but yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I'm curious if you could speak more about, maybe put your finger on what it was, like recognition that there's something more. Like what, you mentioned maybe like something beyond holding, but is there any aspect of that first glimpse of, of nirvana in Hermann Hesse's Siddhartha? Was it, what aspect of nirvana kind of got your attention?
No, that's a really, really good question. I remember you speaking about your time with Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi and how he talked about his translation of Nibbana being like, or Buddho, or Buddha, like more literally Bujati translates as awaken, but he translated it as enlightenment because the image of light is just everywhere around that moment. And for me, actually, that moment and subsequent ones of deep intuition have had an aspect of light to them, often an opening. And one thing that I found really interesting is the first person the Buddha speaks to after his awakening is Upaka, a wanderer on the road. And his final line to him is, I come to beat the drum of the deathless. And then there's these other suttas where the Buddha teaches dependent origination, which is this, very complex system of causality. But then right afterwards, he says, this is the thusness, the inerrancy, the not otherwiseness of Dhamma, tatata avitatata ananya tata, and even his name, Tathagata, the thus gone. And for me, that word tatata, it's almost like he's pointing to something so basically inarticulatable that it's almost all he can rely on is onomatopoeia. Like, that's the drum of the deathless, ta ta ta. And that sense of rightness and like settledness, that was always also there as well, like a sense of something clicking into place. And I find it fascinating that the Buddha holds those two teachings right by each other, like the most complex of all of them, dependent arising, 12 links, and then this, ta ta ta, something so foundational. It's even, it's just these three repeated syllables. But for me, that rightness and that clicking into the heart of like, that's correct, and I recognize that. I suppose those were all elements. And this does wander into a dangerous teleology and all that, but that was my experiences. And I don't know if it's faith in Nibbana or not, but certainly the vision of the Buddha and of a life lived towards that and of that archetype, all held that for me. And yeah, so that was a long answer.
Wow, cool. No, it's a great answer. Yeah, 15. That's pretty young. Yeah.
Well, that's when I think people read Siddhartha generally. It's a weird thing that happens. Ajahn, what about you? What's your relationship with this faith around Nibbana, and when did it first arise?
Yeah, it's interesting looking at causes. I mean, I did also read Siddhartha. I think I was a bit older, probably 20, but yeah, different people's causes. I mean, I just read it and I probably liked the part about the cortisone the best. But it definitely didn't kind of shake it didn't wake me up from my slumber. I didn't hear the drum beat that you're talking about immediately. I think, yeah, I grew up Unitarian, so very open to different things, but not really one clear vision of what would be transcendent. I mean, the early transcendentalists who were, talking about, the transcendent. Many of them were Unitarian, but it was often quite vague what was this higher thing, and kind of grew up. It became so vague, at least in the church that I was attending. In my mind, in my child's mind, that yeah, it just kind of faded out of my awareness and didn't really think about it. So it wasn't a part of my childhood or adolescence, and it wasn't until I probably sat my first Goenka retreat. I mean, I was reading Buddhist books, spiritual books for a time before that retreat, but it was really probably on day 4 or 5 of my first Goenka retreat, when I was 20 years old, that yeah, I had some really, for me, powerful and life-changing experiences with nothing, basically just watching my breath. And I remember Goenkaji in these videotapes talking about that there is, uh, you keep practicing, just keep doing the technique, and then you can put an end to all suffering. That there is, and he probably did even mention nibbana in those first in that first set of 10-day retreat talks. I'll have to go back. Certainly, that's when my curiosity was piqued. I'd been given a technique and a clear goal. Like, you do this technique, you look at the body, see the impermanence, the changing nature of the body, and uh, you'll work your way. You're gaining insight towards a transcendent state, and that was probably given a name for the first time as nibbana. And I think probably also described in my mind for the first time as being a state totally free from greed, anger, and delusion. So in terms of which aspect, like, of nibbana was most appealing for me, it was that very practical aspect. It wasn't anything metaphysical, like searching into emptiness or anything like that. It was just, gosh, my greed and anger are just intolerable and annoying for myself and others, and my delusion, I don't even know half of it. So yeah, I think that was the real start of um, my faith in nibbana, because nibbana had been named clearly for me, and I had, I think for me, I'm not averse to the word faith. Like, it wasn't faith. I'd had a practical experience based on a very tangible and specific technique, and uh, the goal was named so clearly that I could give my heart to it. This is something I want to work towards, and it's not something I know in the present moment, as I was conceiving of it at that point. Yeah, or as I conceive of it, and but it is something I can give my heart to and have faith in, and work towards, and that's a good thing. That's a power, a strength. So that's a bit of my backstory. Um, yeah,
Can I ask a follow-up on that, Ajahn?
sure.
And for people in the chat, feel free to type things in you'd like to discuss as well. But I'm curious, because you're one of the more intentionally systematic monks I know. So when I first met Ajahn Kovilo, he'd made this determination to read the whole Tripitaka or whole Sutta Pitaka, all the suttas in Pali by a certain date. And he had his like daily regimen of pages. And I remember like discovering him in a, discovering him in like a closet, moving through his readings. So before too long, I think you were like getting some prep so that you wouldn't have to read while we were walking through the cold. But you're also really systematic about drawing close to teachers. And so you speak about this sort of nebulous faith you encountered in the transcendentalists and then seeing these practical things. And I've seen you really play to that strength is you've completely immersed yourself in the suttas and you've memorized the whole Dhammapada, which, and so how has your relation, what's that journey, especially like, I'm interested in the teachers you've encountered that have really brought that up for you, but I'm especially interested in your journey through the suttas and what moments really made something shine through that very practical window,
Yeah. So I think in terms of the suttas, which suttas I was able to have faith in, because that really was kind of my door into this broader Buddhist world, is first through the Goenka retreats, but then having sat Goenka retreats, these 10-day retreats, you can eventually do a 8-day Satipatthana retreat. And that's probably it's definitely the first sutta that I ever read. And in that sutta, the Buddha very explicitly gives a gradual path, basically working with Satipatthana, working with the foundations of mindfulness, and says that if you do this, then he gives like an actual timeline. In 7 years, you do this mindfully, and then I guarantee that in 7 years, if you have completed this, then you will basically achieve the state of non-return, if not arhatship. And then he lowers that down. Okay, not just 7 years, 6 years, 5 years, 4 years, 3 years, 2 years, just 1 year. If you practice fully with the Satipatthana, the foundations of mindfulness, then you'll realize Nibbana. And I'm getting excited. I think Goenkaji is like going through these, and I'm like, all right, 7 years, I can do that. That's not that long. I'm still young. I can, achieve this thing and then go out and, whatever, have my cars and cakes and whatever else I wanted at the time. But okay, 7 years, 1 year. Okay, not just 1 year, but half a year, 5 months, 4 months, just working his way down to 7 days. And I was impressed by that. You give you give someone really clear numbers like that. And I'm like, why would the Buddha, or why would this text say that, give such specific numbers if it, didn't have an element of truth to it? So that was probably the first sutta that I had faith in. And I appreciated the systematic approach. I think I had already read some like Chan or Zen Buddhist texts, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, and I found it really inspiring. But the impression that I got when I read that was that nirvana is here and now. And that said, in the Pali Canon says that as well. Nibbana is here and now. But with that Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, it was, it was suggesting my reading was a mystical experience, which was not systematic or gradual. It's just by some kind of, at the time I didn't understand it, shift of attention, you just get to that. And that just wasn't approachable for me at the time. So just you talking about how the importance of being systematic with things. Reading suttas, being systematic with my reading of suttas, reading the foundations of mindfulness, Majjhima number 10, Digha Nikaya number 22, and then seeing recommendations from there. If you like that, then go to this, and especially on access to insight. So mostly in the Goenka world, and then having a friend recommend the biography of Ajahn Mun to me. And that's really shifted from an idea that this is something which, these spiritual athletes 2,600 years ago could do, but maybe it's not possible anymore, to reading Ajahn Mun's biography and having faith rekindled to a whole nother level. And that was another key juncture Um, can I flip that question to you? Like, what after reading Siddhartha? I mean, that's ostensibly Buddhist, but were there Buddhist inspirations of faith in nibbana, or how did your journey into confidence in this capacity for human experience grow? What were if there were books or texts or there were teachers, how did that mature for you?
Yeah, that was a great answer, Ajahn. I think, um, your answer got to something important, which reflects on my own experience, which is uh, the Buddha's use of apophatic method. In in Christian circles, there's two ways of describing God, and one is through cataphatic method by talking about what God is, and apophatic method is the via negativa, describing God by what it isn't. And the Buddha was such a uh, powerful, such a impressive use or practitioner of apophatic method, despite giving 155 synonyms for nibbana, like Ajahn Kovilo had on the talk last Wednesday. They're all somewhat vague, and nothing compared to sort of the embodied or sort of ontologically um, loaded in a certain way view of the transcendent that say God in an Abrahamic religion might be, or something of that nature. I mean, the Buddha was so careful to say, keep letting go, just let go of the five khandhas, and as you let go of that, you'll come to something else, and we call that nibbana, and it's good, and it's beyond words, so we don't have to speak about it too much. And for me, that's the beauty of the practicality, is that what he does say we can have faith in is the triple gem, the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. And what I've seen is that there is no need necessarily to articulate this really clear and reified image of transcendence, beyond just pointing to nibbana through those words, the refuge, the ending of greed, hatred, and delusion, etc. Because when you see it embodied in one of those three gems, it shines through, and you can only really perceive it through the practical. The Buddha compares the enlightened mind to light that lands on nothing. So it's like in those three gems, he gives light that it shines, something for the light to land on or shine through. So when you speak about your encounter with the suttas, I mean, that's the Dhamma. And I have that same impression of, you read these suttas, and the Theravada suttas, the Pali suttas, the Buddha's words, for me, they hit home in a way later sutras from 5 or 6 centuries afterwards never did, in that their clarity and their precision. And you read them, and at first it might seem like some dry lists and repetition, but something begins to shine through the pages, a wisdom which I'd never encountered. And but for me, I think the biggest window through which the faith began to shine, and the sort of the gem of those three gems which channeled that light or refracted it the most powerfully to me, was the Sangha. And specifically, I just remember stepping into a Bayagiri after finishing college, and I was looking into psychotherapy and driving down the 101, listening to Top 40 radio and reading the new Hunger Games and just distracting myself however I could. And I just remember stepping into a Bayagiri monastery and just knowing I needed that container to stop running from what I was running from. And then I met some monks. I met Ajahn Chunda. And then I watched a video of Longpo Cha on YouTube. You can find it from The Mindful Way. And just this image of this being so clearly pure. I think if you really reckon with and encounter that vision, it should shake you, because it shows you what you have the potential to be. And what else would you use a life for? So yeah, that led to me going to Thailand. And I just remember every single time I came into encountered these teachers, it was just this sense of light was refracted through their faces, through them. And, I think people who've had an experience of searching or meeting beings like this, it's like falling in love. It really is. Um, so for me, that was the big turning point. But I'd say that the suttas have been a slow glow, um, of just beginning to go deeper and deeper, and they continue to reward even when I'm not near a teacher. Um, and they all hyperlink together. A certain sutra will reference another sutra. They're just so rich. So those have become deeply meaningful for me as well.
Would you be willing to speak more about? I mean, you did go all the way to Thailand to ordain, and then stayed there for 7, 8 years, a long time. What was it that kept you there? Like what, talking about seeing the light in the Sangha, what, yeah, were there specific people who seemed like supreme refractors of this um, nibbanic, or suggestions of nibbana just in their being?
Yes, in Thailand, for those who haven't gone, I mean, there's beings who are, truly saints, and I feel like I got to live with some, and that does inspire faith. And a being with a mind that powerful, it's often not just when you're with them. There's a whole field of blessings around them, and maybe it's just the fact that people around them tend to be behaving well and quite pure, but it's very potent. And I had that. Then you just see the fruits of the practice and the people around you, like a certain levity and happiness. And and then maybe this speaks to the first gem of the Buddha. In Thailand, it's talked about the Puru, the one who knows. And once again, this walks a thin line between reifying something that perhaps we shouldn't reify. But for me, the practice, Longpo Suchitta says the first few years of practice, 80% of it is strengthening the chitta, the heart. And I think I just felt that growing glow in myself. I mean, I was pretty miserable for the first 3 years at the same time, but at the same time, I could still intuit that there was something onward leading, Opanayiko, and something shining through. And maybe that was the first gem of just seeing the light refracted in however small a measure through you. And that's, maybe it's not as powerful, as bright as the light you see refracted through some of the saints and the arhants, but it also is enough to warm you and kind of keep you going.
Um,
Ajahn?
Gosh, the time just went by so quickly. I mean, for me, similarly, going from the suttas, I mean, going from nothing to having faith in the suttas, was a huge leap. And then actually, yeah, going to a faith in these, in the last 100 years that they were living saints, um, that was another huge leap. But then actually, similar to you, as you're describing, meeting people who I felt, and again, this is one of the weird things about um, faith. Like you can't really know. There's discourses in the Majjhima Nikaya which talks about how do you know if somebody is enlightened, and the Buddha says, well, stay with them and watch their behavior, watch their actions of body, speech, and mind, and stay with them for quite some time. And are they acting from greed? Are they acting from anger? Are they acting in a self-righteous or egotistical way? And you can just watching that over time, and that's a great list or a great suggestions from the suttas. But then actually doing that, yeah, similar with me. I'll just mention for me, Ajahn Liam, going and seeing him, and I didn't live with him for so long, but uh, in these monasteries, you can get extremely close. A lot of these teachers are open to a degree which Americans could just not fathom. And the junior monks are looking after and attending and around these monks, the senior monks, sometimes all day long, and you get to see people and hear about your friends who've lived with these teachers very close and have been watching their behavior and just have nothing but more and more positive things to say about them, and just the feeling. Yeah, what do you can't really yeah, you can't talk yourself into it in a certain way. I think there is a place for intentionally stoking faith in nibbana, intentionally stoking a belief, this confidence that there is uh, there is a complete cessation from suffering. There is a complete uh, lack of holding on and attachment. Um, and that's beautiful. And when you come near to people who you believe are embodying that and have achieved that, um, for me, I've sometimes felt it in my body, and it's something that you just can't describe. It's a lightness or an even total shift of mind state, getting within, a 20-foot perimeter of these some of these teachers, and it's indescribable. And can I prove it? No, but yeah, it's in the realm of faith and confidence, trust, growing belief, seeing evidence, feeling evidence, and yeah, taking that for what it is. So
Thank you, Ajahn. That was beautiful. On a question that's somewhat related, can I bring up a Q&A question, Ajahn?
good questions.
This is a pretty funny one. Ajahn Kovilo and Ajahn Nisabho, do you ever feel guilty for not feeling bad? Ajahn, I'll let you take this one.
Oh. um, I don't feel guilty. I don't feel guilty for not feeling bad because I do feel bad. And yeah, I do feel bad from time to time. And yeah, but it gives me, I mean, that's kind of one of the beautiful and encouraging things about faith is that even when you're feeling bad, you've got something, you've got a brighter, like a horizon to still look up to. And I might seem to be like, ducking under the water and kind of just scampering to stay afloat. But yeah, having faith really does help with that. And so, funny question, Ajahn, what do you think? Do you ever feel bad for not feeling bad? Feel guilty? Excuse me.
I also like scampering to stay afloat.
Yeah,
So it could happen.
yeah,
Um, gosh. There is something interesting in this question for me, in that uh, I think there is this sort of romanticization of suffering in the culture, the suffering artist, and all that, and a certain deep-seated proclivity towards original sin, like guilt, kind of. And yeah, I love what Ajahn Sona says, which is, as you see kind of the difficulty of life, and perceive dukkha, your mind should become happier. Like you want your nurses to be happy and laughing. And I appreciate that. And I do think that there's a sort of riff at the end of dependent origination with suffering, where it says, the final link after this cycle of craving and ignorance is sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. And I just remember after some time of practice, despair no longer really applied to my experience. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. That's not insignificant if you realize it. To say like things still suck. Some days, like this practice is the slow boil in a certain sense, but that despair, like hair ripping, teeth gnashing, hellish despair that you can only get if you don't have right view and you really identify with the khandhas completely, and then your body's not good enough or your partner doesn't love you as much as you love them. Like I still can feel the echoes of that sort of pain, or of watching Othello when I was a layperson. Like if you want to see despair, like watch some Shakespeare. And I think there really comes a point where that no longer is, mindfulness is hovering 1 inch off the ground in a sense, and you're just not impacted in quite the same way. And so, uh, in that sense, I don't feel bad as I used to. But I think it's, yeah, compassion doesn't have to come from a place of sadness, and that's often not the right reaction to someone's grief either. In terms of like really, jumping into the tragedy as well, like compassion is the correct uh, response. So that's my non-answer to that question.
It was a good distinction. Yeah. Or bringing up despair as something which faith really does, or confidence, trust really does address. So yeah, great point.
How can one with traumatic experiences with faith from past interactions with religion cultivate a healthy, wholesome faith in Nibbana and the Triple Gem? That's a good question. So I think a lot of people find themselves in this boat. And to recognize there is some really important language to parse out here. And we're forced to translate this idea of sada into English. And faith speaks to a heart quality that confidence doesn't, but neither is quite right because of the baggage faith comes with. So to read the suttas where the Buddha spells out the limits of Buddhist faith and its nature, there's one called, it's Majjhima Nikaya 95, and basically it's where the Buddha says, he's debating this Brahmin, and he says, look, you can have confidence because of 5 things, because of, you can believe in something because of 5 things, because you have confidence in it, because of unbroken lineage, because of reasoning by analogy, because of et cetera, et cetera. And what he says, in each of these cases, it can turn out either way. Just because you have faith in something or approve of it doesn't mean it's true. So it's wrong to say only this is true, everything else is false. And then the Brahmin asks him, how does one protect truth? And the Buddha says, one protects truth by saying, if one has faith, one says, I have faith. If one believes in unbroken tradition, one says, I believe in this unbroken tradition. But you don't yet say, only this is true, everything else is false. So for me, this is an astounding act of wisdom, circumspection, and restraint on the part of the religious teacher. Is the Buddha saying, look, you don't know. And this is the route to world peace, is all of us getting together and saying, we really don't know. The only place in that sutta the Buddha says one really arrives at truth and deserves that deep confidence is awakening. That is the end goal. And at that point, you don't need to explain yourself to anyone, really, because you're awakened. But I think understanding Buddhist faith as, really just approaching it as much as you can as a working hypothesis, that confidence and understanding you're not asked to swallow more than you can chew with this path. If you are sitting and practicing, it's a practical system of training. And any elements you aren't ready for or aren't interested in, you don't have to approach. And that is such a rare thing to find in the world. So I think just focus on the parts which feel correct and right. I would say going to a monastery at some point is useful because it contextualizes everything. And you'll see a lot of the things that kind of triggered you around the faith before, the ritual, the costume, the accoutrement, but it will be in a context you can understand it, and it hits better. The other way is to read Stillness Flowing. That's Longpo Cha's biography, written by Ajahn Jayasara over 25 years. There's an audio version, there's a free PDF, Stillness Flowing, and it just gives you the whole context for this tradition and the symbols of faith and the language. And just seeing those threads, how they emerged from history, lets you trace them back to the initiating light, and not see them as these weird artifacts that have no meaning. And for me, that's really a lot of what it's about. The more you get to see that this is all an elaborate language for speaking to the potentials of the human heart, the more you can let go of looking at as these outdated, crusts upon some sort of secular philosophy. It's much more than that, but it takes context. Ajahn, did you have anything more to say on that one?
I think so. I mean, there's always things to say there. Maybe we do have more other questions though. But yeah, I think that was a great answer. And yeah, you don't have to use whatever translation or non-translation you want. So for Saddha.
So let me turn this one on you and then Ajahn. Ajahns, I feel more easy faith in the descriptions of rebirth and why than in the cessation, the nibbana. It's not a process or an endpoint, is it? More like a stateless state?
Um, I'd say work to your strength. If you feel the easy faith, in thoughts of rebirth, then stick with that and don't force yourself. I mean, you can check out our video on the 155 names for Nibbana and just look through that. And there are words in there like dukkasa anta, the end of dukkha, or jati marana dukkha, the end of birth, or jati jara, the end of aging and death, the achanta pariyosana, the ultimate end. So that does come up in there. But if that way of conceiving of it is unattractive or actually uninspiring, then yeah, don't dwell on that. Just go to the next. We've got 150 different synonyms or different aspects of nibbana, and all of them are partial, and all of them um, could and do go under this umbrella framing that the Buddha gave when he said that whatever way you conceive of things, and nibbana would be included here, whatever way you conceive of it, the truth is ever other than that. So all of these names can be helpful, but they can also not be helpful. Like if any of these terms, just the way that we imagine them, given our own given our own perspectives, which are by definition limited, is not arousing faith, then the Buddha would not have given that teaching, would not have called nibbana that when he was speaking to you. So we've pulled all these different names from all over the different canon. The Buddha speaking to many different people. He also called it an island. I mean, that's hard to not get your mind around and want to head towards. Called it a refuge, the highest happiness, the highest peace, the highest bliss, all of these. So yeah, experiment with that. And if faith comes later and seeing an end of, he also called it the end of the defilement. So yeah, maybe that's more inspiring for you. And in a stateless state, yeah, that's just about the right level of paradox. And yeah, to kind of and these koans can be quite helpful actually, to get one out of one's head, because that being too heady about these things can be counterproductive. So, but great question. Yeah.
Rick, we may come back to you, or you can come to Zoom, but I did want to get fingerprint because I haven't seen them before, and this question seems somewhat urgent or somewhat something. Dear Bontes, I have almost completely dropped out of mainstream society and find myself really quiet and sometimes sad from lack of connection. However, I just can no longer be excited about chasing happiness on the conditioned plane. I am not called to be a monastic, however, how to interact with others without frightening them with the reality and being at peace with people who don't practice. Okay. Oh, we only have a minute. hmm. I would say that the Buddha spoke about seclusion a great deal, but that was in the context of a society that was profoundly integrated and warm. We have to go right about now, but a huge part of our project as practitioners in modernity is to rebuild those connections and cultivate social bonds within the practice and within a spiritual community. So whether that means finding something in your city, sitting groups, giving, dana, one of the first paramitas, or traveling to a monastery on occasion, finding a way to integrate yourself with others is essential and really essential. And brightness of the heart is important. The metrics of normalcy, flourishing, and warmth should be guiding stars for you. And fingerprint, I would love to talk about this more if you want to join us on Zoom along with others. So on that note, we have Zoom. Ajahn, did you want to make any final announcements before we step off?
Yeah, just a quick announcement for anyone who's near Ukiah, California. The monks from Abhayagiri will start teaching at Sudana Center. That's 225 South Hope Street, the second Wednesday of every month. So that's tonight. I'm actually going to go there right now and sit with Ajahn Karunadhamma. So that's just an announcement. And yeah, just an invitation to everyone who would like to join Zoom, because that's a great way to connect if one is isolated or if one is separated because of all the uninspiring and really quite depressing things that are happening in the world. It's a really caring and supportive community that people are tapping into from all around the country and even internationally. So just an invitation there. And Ajahn Nisabho, thank you for nice conversation. So
Oh, likewise, Ajahn, it's always a pleasure. And we'll see you up here in about a month. For those who also are interested and are in Seattle, we'll have one of our senior monk kind of big brother teachers, Ajahn Kachana, will be in Seattle this Saturday. And he's a former theoretical physicist from Berkeley, which leads to fascinating comparisons with Dhamma. And he'll be there on Saturday, and you all should meet him. He's amazing. So one more wonderful guest. Yeah, once again, join us on Zoom. I posted the link in the chat. If it's not there for you, then just go to our website, clearmountainmonastery.org, and you'll find the link about halfway down the page in the event listing or in the description to the YouTube video. And Ajahn, thank you so much.
have a good night.